All right, in this example, what we're going to do now is take what we've learned in this chapter and we're going to build a practical finished example. And the example that we're going to build is an automatic table of contents for a document. If you look inside the exercise files, you'll see these two files right here, Automatic TOC, start and finished. So I'm going to build this example starting from the starting point, and you can either follow along with me or you can just go ahead and jump right to the finished version. Before I do that, though, I'm going to bring up the finished version in the browser so you can see what it's doing. So let's just double click on this guy. You can see that this is a document that's got a whole bunch of, lorem ipsum text in it. And there's a whole bunch of these headings, right? There's the introduction, there's this heading here, and so on. This right here, this table of contents, contains a bunch of links that jump to the various places in the document. So for example, if I click on this guy, you see it jumps right down to that heading. And I go back, I can jump to this guy down here, and it goes right to that heading. This table of contents, what's happening is this is being built up automatically by some jQuery code. So we're going to see how to build that automatic TOC generator, which will look through the document for various kinds of headers, and then use those to build named anchors inside the document where we want to jump to. Okay, so let's do that. Close this, and I'm going to bring this up in my editor. So here's the starting point, and what we're going to do is write this function here called build bookmarks. You can see that when the document ready event fires, that function is being called, and it's being called with two arguments. The first argument is the type of header tag that we want to serve as the TOC locations. And the second argument is the ID of the div that we want to append the resulting table of contents HTML into. So you can see that that's this div right here that has the header ID on it. So that's where the title is. This is where the subtitle is. So we're going to build that table of contents and put it in right at the end of this div here. The other thing you should realize also is that each one of these sections in the document is enclosed in a div and has an ID. And there's these H3 tags that are at the top of each one of the sections. These are the headers for each section in the document. So what we're going to do is write some jQuery code that builds this bookmark list. So what we're going to do right off the bat is write a jQuery statement that creates the unordered list that's going to serve as the table of contents. So the way we're going to do that is just tell jQuery to make me a new list. So we're just going to say make me an unordered list whose ID is equal to bookmarks list, and we'll just close that off. Okay, so now I've got my new unordered list there. So for each one of the header tags, there's two things we need to do. First, we need to create a named anchor and insert it into the header tag, because that's going to serve as the jump location for the links in the TOC. Then we need to add that link into this unordered list right here that will point to the named anchor. So what we're going to do is get all the divs, because the sections are all divided into divs. So I'm going to write a jQuery that says get me all the divs. But I don't want, so it's going to say not the div where the ID attribute is equal to header, because we're not going to be looking inside this guy right here. That's where the TOC is going to go. So get me every div that does not have an ID that's equal to the header. Okay. Plus, so we're looking inside divs, but we want the H3 tags. That's what we need. So I'm going to add on the stir which tag argument. And you can see stir which tag is the H3 that's being passed in. So we're looking for H3s inside the divs that are not the header div. Now I'm going to get a little bit tricky here. So recall from earlier in the course when I covered the traversing section, there's a function called each. And I'm going to use the each function. And the each function is going to iterate over each one of the contents that we find, because there's two things that we have to do. So I'm going to write a function, and my each function is going to do a couple of different things. The first thing it's going to do is create the named anchor. And since we need named anchors to be unique in the document, we have to have a unique way of naming them. So what I'm going to do is create a little variable up here named anchor count, and I'm going to initialize that to 0. And we're going to increment that value each time so that way all the named anchors have unique names. So what I'm going to say is inside the each function, I'm going to write this because the this keyword will refer to the h3 tag. So I'm going to set the HTML for the h3 tag to be a named anchor, so a name equals, and then the name is going to be bookmark, and we're going to add the anchor count to it. So that's going to be C anchor count. Okay, so now we're making the unique named anchor, and we're going to close that off now. So we close off that named anchor tag, and that's going to set the HTML to the named anchor. But now we need to add in the existing HTML for the h3. We don't want the h3 to be blown away, so we're going to say add this dot existing HTML. So what that does is take the existing HTML for the h3 and just put a named anchor right in front of it. So now we've created the named anchor. What we need to do now is add our link to the list that we're creating. So to do that, we're going to write olist.append. So that's the list. So we're going to say list.append, and we're going to make a new list item. So we're going to use jQuery to do that, and I'm just going to pass the jQuery object some HTML. That's going to be a list item, and inside the list item there's going to be an anchor or a link, and the href is going to go to the named anchor for the bookmark, right? And that's this guy that we made up here, plus the anchor count, and then we're going to increment the anchor count, plus some closing HTML, plus the text that's inside the h3. And remember, to get the text that's inside the h3, we write this dot text. So we've created the anchor. We need to close off the named anchor tag. So before I forget that, we need to close off the list, the link, and we need to close off the list item. So now we've created the named anchor, we've created the list item, and we should be pretty much good to go at this point. So let's scroll back on over here. Okay, so now after we've finished creating the content that's going to go in the list and the named anchor, when this loop here terminates, we need to put the list of links we just created inside this div. So now we're going to say jQuery, get me the ID for the bookmark node, right? Remember, it was passed in as a variable, and that's going to be header. So get me the ID for the div dot append, and we're going to put the list into that div. Okay, one more time. Let's just see what this is doing. So we have a variable that keeps track of a counter so that all of our named anchors are unique. We create an unordered list. That's going to be the list of TOC. For every div that's not the header, plus the h3s, we're going to loop over each one of those guys. And we're going to create a named anchor that goes in front of the h3 tag. That's the link destination. Then we create a list item that has the link into it that jumps to that named anchor. And so we do that for each one of the h3s. And when we've done that, we put the entire list into the div. All right, here we are in the browser. And you can see that when I bring up the document, that's exactly what happens. So now each one of these h3s has a little invisible named anchor in front of it. So when I click, it just jumps right there. And you can see that the text of each one of these link items is the same text as the h3. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up. Now you know how to use content manipulation and retrieval to solve a real practical problem.